All right, we'll go ahead and get started on the economic development for appropriations for the 2012. And I'm going to ask Commissioner Vance Smith, you want to go ahead and come on up? Do you want to sit down, Commissioner? You look kind of tired. You want to sit down? Okay. You may proceed, or Angela can proceed, whichever.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The 12, just to kind of refresh your memory on the motor fuel tax, the estimate that has been given by the governor on motor fuel tax for this year is $898 million. Last year, as of June 30th, 2010, we collected $852 million. This year projections $898. To give you a little history, back in 2007, that collection was $1.027 billion. So our motor fuel tax was down a little bit, and we're hoping that it's coming back up. And as of this past board meeting at the GDOT board, we had collected 15.9% more motor fuel in February than we had February last year. So we had some pretty good months starting out in July, August, September, around $80 million each month. January was around $70 million. But if it'll hold, that'll be good. We can't predict what'll happen with the price, the way the pricing's going right now, but it'll be good. Overall, as you know, we live off the motor fuel tax, but in the appropriations arena, our intermodal division, which is transit, rail, airports, and ports, that appropriation this past year was $6.8 million, and we've been asked to give a 1% reduction of $68,000. And if we do that, that would come out of the transit area of the appropriations process. So now I can go. Do you want me to go through each one of these line items? Or
that's okay. Any members have any questions? Okay. What number are you? 20? Okay.
And referring to our airports and all, is there any difference between federal and state airport funding programs in the terms of eligibility in the process?
Now, Ms. Carol Coma's here. I can only give you the 30,000-foot view. There's 95% is federal, 2.5 state, 2.5 local. But if you'd like for Ms. Carol to speak to that directly.
Yeah, I was going to have her come up in just a minute, Mr. Chairman. So.
Okay.
I will mention, too, on the program that was started a year ago, the LMIG program, the local grants program, that amount's going to remain the same, $96 million, and in that arena, $96.3 million.
Okay. Representative Van Elps.
Mr. Smith, it appears in the current budget that approximately 60 or 70 million is appropriated for matching fund airport monies. Is that enough, or is there?
Well,
is that adequate?
We can always use more. We don't ever want to say no to the dollar, but I understand all agencies are in the same type we're in. And I know I don't want to steal Miss Carol's thunder because she's going to talk to you in a minute, but the state of Florida is going to spend over $150 million on their airports. And
for matching purposes?
Well, yeah, and she'll get into the details of that. That just gives you a comparison of what they're spending compared to us.
So. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Representative Hunter?
I don't know if you want to wait for this till she comes up, but what kind of impact has the reduction in those funding been for the airports? What kind of impact has that had?
Well, and here again, Ms. Carroll will be telling you, but it's everywhere from runway extensions that are needed to accommodate the smaller jets for business development, all the way to lighting and safety issues, to resurfacing issues, to refueling stations for airports, to hangar space for airports. So it affects the whole array of things that you do at airports, which is, again, tied in with economic development.
What type of funding are you talking about to get this back up to standard? I mean, how much money are you talking about?
I'd probably let Carol give
Okay.
you that exact figure instead of me just taking a stab at it. I'd rather her to give you the fact on that.
Okay, any other questions? Angela, you want to say anything? Okay. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. All right, we're going to ask Carol Comer to come up. She's in charge of all the airports in the state. And Carol, you want to come over here and sit and ask all these hard questions we have?
I'll sit up here with you.
Okay. Yeah. Chairman Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I understand about the 95, the 2.5, and the 2.5. But the difference between the federal and the state airport form of funding, as far as in terms of the eligibility of the projects, I mean, can you give me?
There are a number of airports in the state that are not eligible for federal funding. They are not recognized in FAA's program. We have 6 of those airports. So the federal program doesn't even apply to them, and they are dependent solely on our state and local airport aid program.
Could you tell me which?
The 6 airports, they are, let's see, Buena Vista, Dahlonega, Hawkinsville, Soperton, Folkston, and Spence Field and Moultrie, where they have the Ag Expo.
Mm-hmm. How do they compete for these federal funds and state funds?
Well, unfortunately, at this moment, with the funding level that we have this year and proposed for the coming year, we will not have a state and local airport aid program. It'll be the first time since the 1960s that we have not had been able to provide any funding assistance through the state and local airport aid program. But there's a priority system for the federal funds and for the state program when we have one. The federal program prioritizes their projects based on safety and capacity needs. And you will find that in Georgia, certainly the air carrier airports are going to compete extremely well for federal funding. But there are only about 10 airports, and most of them are situated here around the metropolitan Atlanta area, that are going to compete for the remainder of those federal discretionary dollars and our state apportionment dollars. So you're leaving about 80 airports in our system that really are not able to take advantage of those federal funds and have historically relied on our state and local airport aid program. I will add one other thing.
Sure.
In the state and local airport aid program, our priority system has always focused on the smaller, more rural airports that aren't able to capture those federal dollars. And one of the things that our state and local program does is consider economic development as part of the priority system. So projects with an economic development component are going to compete well for our state dollars. FAA does not allow economic development as a consideration for funding for their projects.
Can I look up? And of course, we never know what they're going to do in Washington. But currently, the proposal they're talking about is to cut a lot of the federal aid dollars in the airport.
They certainly are, and I think one of the things that really got our attention about a week ago is there are also some proposals that will reduce the federal share of the projects from 95% down to 75% over the next 2 years. So that will increase even our state match and the local match on those projects.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Representative Hanner.
Going back to what I asked the Commissioner a few minutes ago, what type of funding are we talking about that would be adequate to get the airport aid program back going?
Well, I think in FY 2009, we had an appropriation level of approximately $15 million, and we have been working, certainly with your assistance over the last 10 years, to get the funding to that level. And that's pretty reasonable funding, because it allows us approximately $2 million to match the federal funds that we feel like will come to the state each year. There's no set formula. We can compete for discretionary dollars at FAA's discretion. But that $2 million of $15 million would match the federal funds that we would anticipate receiving, give us a little flexibility to take some more federal funds if they were available. We have, over the years, had a airfield pavement management study, and it has said that we need $7 million annually to invest in maintenance on our airfield pavements in order just to keep them in reasonable shape so that they are serviceable. So we need $7 million for pavement maintenance, and that leaves us about $6 million to address some of the projects, the applications that come to us that have an economic development component and projects that FAA will not fund.
A few minutes ago, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, a few minutes ago, you mentioned some systems. Are those the most critical systems that you would need?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And I guess it sort of follows in that the impact the reduction has had. Is any statements to that? I meant.
I think that certainly it has crippled our ability to assist the airports with maintenance projects and capital projects that have that economic development component. But I think we've heard from our airport managers and airport sponsors, it has been so difficult for them to budget, not knowing what type of program we're going to have. And so they feel very reactionary. So, possibly I think we're not maximizing the dollars that we do have because we can't count on them.
One other thing, do you know what other states are doing?
Well, actually, yes, as the commissioner mentioned, that most all of the states are seeing budget reductions at every turn. But here in Georgia, we are the only state that basically has lost our state and local airport aid program. All the other states in the southeast are continuing to fund the state and local component. Florida, as the commissioner mentioned, is probably looking around $130 to $150 million this year. That's down from $178 million last year. North Carolina is typically funds their state and local airport aid program anywhere from $15 to $17 million annually, and this year they're looking at around $12 to $15 million. State of Tennessee, usually a $25 million program. They're probably close to a $20 million program this year. And Alabama, South Carolina, and Mississippi have all maintained their same funding levels. So they are still continuing to provide funding for that state and local component in addition to matching their federal funds.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Let me get Representative Von Epps.
Okay. I guess, if you will, help me to understand how the appropriation from the One Georgia, how does that calculate or figure into your actual expenditures and needs?
In 2006, in July, the One Georgia Authority created the Air Georgia funding program to go along with their equity and some of their other funding programs. And that program is very targeted to certain types of projects and limits the eligibility to not all airports in the state. I think 49 airports are technically eligible because they're in Tier 1 and Tier 2 counties. But the focus of that program has been, and it's been a wonderful program because we have completed 17 runway extensions with those dollars. But it is strictly for extending runways to 5,000 feet. So of the 49 airports that are eligible for the funding, if you already have a 5,000-foot runway, you're not going to be able to have a competitive application. They're not going to go beyond that. But I think probably about $25 million has been invested in that program to extend runways at 17 airports. But again, it addresses one component of the needs of our system.
Chairman Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you can't tell, I think you see that we're all concerned about this in the budget. And I'm kind of putting you or the Commissioner on the spot here. In your conversations with OPB and all and setting this budget, what were the reasons behind eliminating this program?
I cannot address that, Commissioner. Can you?
I don't know if it's so much a reasoning for taking the money out of that program. It's just that they're just looking for money somewhere, and they've got to take it from somewhere. So I don't know if that might be a better question for OPB.
Okay, Carol, you want to mention that letter you got from FAA and just kind of give us layman's terms on it, if you would?
Yes, sir. Last week we received the letters. I did not put in context my knowledge of all the other state programs, but I had the opportunity to meet with the regional and district FAA personnel along with the 7 other state aviation offices about a month ago. And again, FAA mentioned, their concern about the reduction in the state aviation programs and basically asked, how it was going to affect us. And we certainly came forward and said, well, we don't have a state and local program at this point in time and are certainly unsure for the coming year. And FAA, I think after digesting the information, wrote us a letter and basically expressed their concern for the lack of our state program, because they know that their program cannot meet all of the needs, and they certainly are looking to us, as we've done in the past, to come to the table and be a partner in developing our airports and maintaining them. And certainly it's not stated in the letter, but just sort of in the conversations, I think FAA feels like they want to help those states that help themselves. And I think again, historically, we've certainly been in good favor with FAA, but I somewhat feel with this letter that that posture, could potentially change, based on how we're able to maintain our airports.
Chairman Davis has a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Coomer, can you tell me, you mentioned 17 of the 49 have already received funds for the extension.
Yes, sir.
That's correct. Do we have like a top 10 for the next 10 that are up and available for it, and like a potential cost involved in that?
Under the Air Georgia program? Are you talking about under the Air Georgia program,
yes,
or
ma'am,
just the state program in general?
No, under the state program in general.
Do we have a list of airport extensions, like the top 10?
Well, you said there was 49 that were available to it, correct?
Under the Air Georgia program, there were 49 airports that were eligible under their program. Not all 49 of those airports in eligible one Georgia counties needed a runway extension. They were already at 5,000 feet or greater. But we do have runway extensions we do have airports in our state that have runways that we certainly recognize could benefit from being extended.
And do we have a priority list on them? To where maybe, even though the program is not being funded right now, but if we had a priority list and we knew where those needs were, that maybe we could address them in a different fashion.
We certainly have the list of those airports that we feel like runway extensions would be beneficial, and then we prioritize those extensions once we receive applications for communities requesting funding. But we can certainly prioritize the ones that are out there for you. And I would tell you that the airport in your community probably is tops on my list.
Thank you. Not on the rest of us, but just hers? I got it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Representative Hanner?
Do other states use motor fuel money to fund?
Other states fund their aviation programs very differently than Georgia does. We are one of about 4 states that fund their state airport aid program strictly through appropriations from their state general fund. Again, other states of varying combination, but yes, some states do use a portion of the motor fuel tax funds that are collected in their state, along with other excise taxes that are charged on aviation fuels, just a lot of different things.
Okay. Anybody else? Commissioner, what I was going to ask you, since you're still sitting there, lapsed funds, did y'all give back to the Treasury any state funds that you know of? Angela may have to answer that for us.
Not that I know of, Dan. Is she here?
She'll leave.
We give back about $2 million.
Okay. What is that you're giving back? Do you know? Is that fines and fees? What is it?
We may end up having contracts at
Okay. Why don't you come up here and tell us where we can stream you on the internet, Angela?
Oftentimes what happens when we set up contracts, and we'll encumber the funds for those contracts, but say, for instance, throughout the contract, we may not need all the money that was actually set aside for the contract. So when we go to take the PO down, that releases that excess money on the contract.
So those are motor fuel dollars you're giving
No,
back to
state general funds.
state general funds? Okay, $2 million. What do y'all normally average? Do you know?
Ooh, I'd have to go back and check, sir.
That would be good to know.
Okay.
I'd like to have that. Fines and fees and that you have now. Don't y'all hold those, or do you operate on them?
We don't. Well,
Other than the outdoor advertising and, you know, I'm sure you have some fees that you're collecting for something.
they go back into whatever program that they're actually collected for. They actually go back in to subsidize that program.
Okay. So you hold them over year to year. Okay. Yeah. Chairman Roberts.
Going off of the same question there, I'd like a list if I could. I'd like to see what fines have been paid out by GDOT into the general fund and the amount.
Okay.
Please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. I know we have the president of the Georgia Airport Association here. Does he want to make any comments? I'm sorry? Okay. Thank you. All right, Commissioner. Oh, you want to say something else? Okay. Thank you for being here. Go get some rest. You probably worked Saturday and Sunday, didn't you? Okay. Why don't we take Mike Cassidy? You want to go ahead and come on up? And I know yours will be brief, or should be. Mike is with the Georgia Research Alliance and supposed to be attached to economic development eventually. You may proceed when you're ready.
I have some material for Mr. Chairman and
Okay.
members. So the Georgia Research Alliance would be new to this committee, and just briefly, we're a little bit different kind of an entity. We're a nonprofit organization that was set up back in 1990 to find ways of bringing our research universities into closer alignment with each other, and also to have them participate more vigorously in the state's overall economic development activities. So our business is to build very, very unique capabilities in our research universities for them to do cutting-edge research in areas that we believe have economic benefit for the state. Broadband telecommunications, biotechnology, alternative energy being some of those examples. And with help from dollars that you appropriate to this program, we attract top research stars to the campuses. We call them eminent scholars. That's very much the centerpiece of what we do. To do that, we establish endowments in cooperation with the private sector to help induce these folks to come into the state and join us. There are 62 of those scholars across our campuses today, all engaged in what we would call frontier research, really on the cutting edge. We also participate with them in establishing their laboratory environment, so we do a good deal.
Hey, Chairman Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the presentation. Just for everyone on the committee's sake here, the eminent scholars, we have some kind of local or a private match to these eminent scholars, correct? So for every $500,000 we put into it, we get a $500,000 match by some kind of private dollars. Is that my understanding of it?
Correct, except in the case of the chairs that we established, it's $750,000 that comes from the state, and that requires a $750,000 private match. The Georgia Research Alliance eminent scholars, it was a decision on that they would be at a little bit higher funding level, so the endowment's a total of $1.5 million. There's a similar program in the Board of Regents that's operated on and off over the years that required the $500,000 match.
All right, so this is separate from, so this is not the one that we're moving from the Board of Regents over to the Department of Economic, or it is?
We're moving this from the Board of Regents to Economic Development.
So
There is no similar program today at Board of Regents at the $500,000 level. Historically, that has been in place, and so there were two different eminent scholar programs, if you will. The one at the higher level, at the total of $1.5 million endowment, that was specific to our research universities. So in the case of the public institutions, Georgia Tech, University of Georgia, Health Sciences University of Georgia, and Georgia State University, those chairs are endowed at a total of $1.5 million, with $750,000 from the public sector, $750,000 from the private sector.
So by eliminating this, if we eliminate $750,000, we're going to also lose $750,000 in private dollars, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Hey, any other questions for Mike? I don't see any, Mike. Thanks for being
Thanks
here.
very much.
And I'm going to ask Carol Comer. Carol, once you come back up, I think I cut you off a little bit too quick if you're still here. Airports. Come back up here. I think you need to tell the committee here how much of an economic impact airport state aid helps airports and what kind of economic impact you know that it has for the state.
Well, actually, we're in the process right this moment of updating our statewide airport economic impact study. We're probably about 4 months into that. It's probably about 5 months from being completed. And we haven't done one since the early 1990s. So I don't have, facts and figures available to me right this second to give you from the study for just an overall impact. But certainly, a revenue study that we did several years ago indicated that more than $100 million of sales tax revenue is generated from aviation activities in the state. And that includes the sale of aviation fuels, avgas, and jet fuel, the ad valorem taxes that are charged on aircraft, sales tax that's collected off the sale, the transaction of selling an aircraft, and also the sales tax on other aviation goods and services. Certainly when you try to wrap your arms around the benefit of an airport and the impact it has in a community, there's a company that chose not to locate in a community down in South Georgia strictly because of their airport about 2 years ago, and it was about 150 jobs. It was a bakery from Pennsylvania, and they loved everything about this community, but when the corporate CEO or the president of the company flew into the community to hopefully finalize the deal, he just was appalled at how inadequate their airport was, and they chose to go somewhere else. So trying to quantify that's part of what we're trying to do in our economic impact study. But that's just one example of how important an airport is to serving not only that company who operates a corporate aircraft of their own, but certainly those that have customers and vendors and suppliers and things that use corporate aviation. I mean, that's certainly become since 9/11. When certainly going through the commercial service airports became very cumbersome because of all the security measures, corporate aviation has really grown leaps and bounds and continues to do well today.
Okay, thank you for that overview. I think that will do it. I know Vernon, do you want to say anything while you're here, since you represent the airports?
Mr. Chairman, just two things.
You need to come to the table, please. That's okay.
Just in closing, two things I'd like to say is, as Carol just touched on,
Why don't you tell everybody who you are and all that?
My name is Vernon Lee, represent the Georgia Airports Association, which is made up of about 104 airports in Georgia, which generate about $100 million, as Carol just said. It goes into the general fund, and there's not a mechanism by which to put any of that money back into the airports. And that's what you all have just been asking great questions. I appreciate the questions, but we're trying to figure out a way to sustain some of those dollars back to airports. And then the only other thing I mentioned, I think she mentioned in that letter, is that the last board meeting that the Georgia Airports Association had, FAA guy did come to the meeting, and as I was sitting on the sidelines, what got my attention was him basically stating that if funding was not kept up for them to be able to recertify airports as they need to based on their requirements, that if they did not recertify an airport, that the monies that they had put into those airports from federal dollars would fall onto the locals to have to come up in essence like a bank calling in a loan, but it would be the Federal Aviation calling a loan on the locals because they didn't have the adequate state dollars to keep up their portion. Again, that was a statement made by the FAA guy. Again, as you know, Carol can expand on any of that. But that's the two main things I'd like the committee to know, the dollars amount that they are raising, and then, of course, what the FAA had told them at the last meeting. Other than that, Mr. Chairman, I have no further comments.
Okay. Any other questions on that? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Did you want to hear from the public by state agency, or were you going to do that later?
We can hear from the public now.
Okay.
I thought yours was rail.
Well, it's transit.
Transit, okay.
I'm happy to wait if you're going to do the public hearing part later.
Well, if you want to go ahead and speak on rail, you can go ahead and do that.
I don't want to speak on rail.
You don't? You speak on transit?
Yes.
Oh, come on up and speak on transit then.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. I'm Tom Bauer with the Georgia Transit Association. We represent Georgia's 114 rural systems and 16 urban systems. I just wanted to kind of illuminate sort of for you, the commissioners already explained where the cuts that came across the GDOT budget came from, and that they were from transit. We understand that the bulk of the GDOT budget is motor fuel tax funds, so that when the governor has to balance the budget, that the airports and transit are the places that are most turned to as general funds in the GDOT budget. However, saying that, I would like to point out that there is a recommended reduction from the governor of $691,000 for transit capital. That actually leaves $7 million in federal transit funds on the table, and these are funds that would be used for rural vans, for urban buses, other equipment for urban and rural systems. To be clear, though, in checking with the GDOT staff, we understand that and that's about a 17% cut, as I understand it. We understand from them that their first priority will be sort of from small to large, so that the first things they will sort of process or fund are rural transit systems, and then if there was some money left, smaller urban and larger. However, as it looks right now, if none of that $700,000 is restored, then there would not be any money for small urban systems such as Gainesville or Columbus or Athens or Augusta, or certainly not for the larger urban systems like Cobb County and Gwinnett. So we wanted to bring to your attention, I know you were asking for economic development generation traditionally, transit for every $1 invested will return $6 million invested in the community. So we would just like you, if you could restore some or all of those funds. We do have an old fleet. I don't have the latest figures, but I know that we have one of the older fleets for vans and buses across the country. Generally, the department tries to help local governments replace those, and urban systems replace those after 100,000 miles or 5 years. And so you could see that 100,000 miles will probably not go real far for a transit vehicle. The capital needs are 80% federal, 10% state, and 10% local. So that's where the $7 million that I was talking from in terms of federal funds that we would leave on the table. And just in the last paragraph to help you, that would could mean it's as many as 20 buses for Georgia's urban systems, or if the rural transit needs were not met, that would fund probably about 200 plus vans. But we did want to point out, we understand that the times are tough, but that we feel like we took sort of an extraordinary hit here in FY12. So.
Question here, and Chairman Davis, is that you?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
You're stating that we're leaving $7 million on the table, yet I'm looking at the governor's recommendation here, and it looks like there is a net increase to this division, the transit division of GDOT, of $10.6 million increase, no decrease at all, with an additional $11.3 million. And while we're reducing some of the state dollars, we're actually increasing the federal dollars by $11.3 million, if I'm reading that correct.
They're just reflecting the federal match. That's not working.
Go. Your own.
That just reflects OPB decided to reflect the federal match that they would get with the state funds. They don't always do that in the recommendation, but the $11 million that's showing up in the tracking document,
yes, sir,
is the $11 million that they will get with the funds provided. It's not an increase. We just usually don't show that in the document. We usually just show state funds.
So is what he's stating correct, that the $700,000 that we're cutting out of state funds, is it actually going to cost us $7 million in federal dollars?
Yeah.
Why doesn't it reflect that? Maybe I'm missing something here. Why doesn't the document?
Well, we don't reflect. We never reflect federal money lost in the document.
Mr. Chairman, I was puzzled by that too when I saw those figures in both the FY11 and FY12, and that was the explanation I got, that OPB was sort of doing a different kind of record keeping this year.
Well, it shows state dollars and it shows total dollars,
right?
And the total dollars shows an $10.6 million increase, and that's why I'm confused.
It's not an increase though. They're just OPB decided to reflect the total funds. So that's the state match and the federal. Typically, it's just the state funds that you'll see in the document. But
right.
we never reflect federal funds forfeited. Not for the airport aid program. We've never done that. OPB just decided to reflect total funds.
After the committee meeting, why don't you and I talk about that, because I absolutely do not understand.
Okay.
That makes three of us, Chairman Davis.
Okay.
that I can't figure that out.
Chairman Davis, you got any more questions? Okay.
Well, I'm sorry.
Sorry. Okay. I think that's it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any help you could give us would be appreciated.
All right. Gentleman behind you there,
Yes, sir.
do you want to come up here and tell us who you are? And
Mr. Chairman, thank you. My name is Doc Watson. I'm with the Georgia Aviation Authority, and I just wanted to add on to what Carol had stated. We typically fly, well, this year so far we've flown about 210 hours in support of Department of Economic Development. And when you're talking about, I just want to reiterate the fact that we would like to see money going into airport extensions because it greatly enhances our ability to get the clients to where they need to go. There have been times, even though we have King Airs that can land on runways that are 3,000 foot, the 5,000 foot restriction sometimes on some of the airports is a hindrance due to higher temperatures in the summer and wet runway also throughout the year when we're restricted due to weight considerations and aborted takeoff considerations. When we have a full load of 6 passengers, economic development personnel, sometimes we cannot take them to an airport that they would like to get to because of the runway length. So I'm just here to also put in a plug for the increase in runway length.
Any questions for him? He's with the Georgia Aviation Authority. Okay. Thank you. Who else in transportation is here? That is Greta here? All right, you want to come up?
Good afternoon. Mark Peoples, Chief Financial Officer with Georgia Regional Transportation Authority. As you can see in the tracking document, our budget reduction this year is a total of 10% of our base budget. We were able to fund those funds by partially federalizing 4 engineering positions as well as some additional personal service savings in administration. Happy to answer any questions about our budget request.
Okay. Any questions? I think we took care of you in the 11 budget anyway.
11 amended, yes,
okay.
sir.
Okay. All right. I don't see any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Let's see. Yes. From PSC, Stan, you're sitting on the front row like a good student. So.
We heard the call from the floor of the House, Mr. Chairman. We hustled on over.
Oh, good. Thank you. What page are they on, tracking document? PSC. 14. Page 14 of the tracking document. 15? 13. 13, okay. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Stan Wise, the current chairman of the Public Service Commission. Abbreviated from what you've been placed in front of you, we're looking at the governor's recommendation on the 2012 budget, another 7.8% from our current 11 state funding, overall 22% since 2008. Specifically, that comes from our administration program. The 2012 budget will see a net reduction of $206,000, primarily from attrition, retirements, and resignations. Our facilities protection, we're seeing a slight increase to cover the change in the employer's share of the retirement system cost. The governor recognizes a federally recognized, a highly praised office that we run for facilities protection. The Federal Office of Pipeline Safety acknowledges the role that that part of the agency serves. We received 80% federal reimbursement in that account. Utilities regulation, the 2012 reduction is a net cut of $463,000. 381 of that, almost 382, is in personal services. That same department and the heart and soul of our agency has a 25% vacancy rate, with 15 of the 60 authorized positions currently unfunded. The commission would be hard pressed to further cut this budget without negatively affecting already diminished staff levels. Bottom line is the governor's proposed cuts are adopted. The PSC will have no funding for outside consultants and will be unable to fill critical vacancies, and several of our longtime staffers will be retiring in 2012 and 2013.
Stan, will you pull that mic closer to you?
I'm sorry, sir.
I'm not. Is it still on? Does it show red?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay. If you'll pull it closer and everybody can hear.
All right. Sorry about that. We've been asked if we can handle an additional 1% cut in fiscal year 2012. The simple answer is no. There are some critical areas that we just simply are not going to be able to meet. Some of our research support from both NRRI and our support of our National Association is key on some of the federal issues that we in fact lobby the government on, and how it affects the Georgia constituents. So we're just bumping up against the wall now, Mr. Chairman, and just want to acknowledge that we're still taking in fines and fees that we return to the state treasury. Fiscal year 10, $1.5 million.
Okay. Any questions from the committee? Okay. Anybody else want to say anything? Chuck, you want to say anything?
Okay. I'm
Okay.
sorry, Mr. Chairman, I didn't see Commissioner Eaton slip in.
I saw Doug Everett come in. Did he leave? Yes. Okay. All right. I think that's it. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Department of Ag.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gary Black, Commissioner of Agriculture. It's a pleasure to be with members of the committee again today, and look forward to giving you a very quick report on 12 as we've made our plans. First of all, I want to thank Mr. Chairman for you for coming over, and thank you for what y'all did for us in 11, and thank you for coming over and taking a tour of our. It was an honor to have you at our building just a couple of weeks ago, and Representative Davis, thank you for coming. I'm sorry I wasn't there, and hopefully you'll maybe it was a revelation to and opportunities for the rest of the committee. We actually have labs over there that are protecting public health for the citizens of Georgia. There's a lot of new discoveries over at our good department, and good people that are carrying out some very vital roles for the state of Georgia. So we're glad you guys could come join us and be over there. We, with regards to some of the things that we've got in preparation for budget, two things I wanted to highlight for you real quickly. Today we began our very long needed and long expected strategic planning process. We had about 43 stakeholders from all across the state. Mr. Polk was up here, Chairman Roberts, and others from all across the state to help us begin to put a 3.5-year strategic plan together for the department. Those groups will also be accompanied by about 21 other discipline groups from a wide range of interests, and from markets to international trade to fuel and measures, and a wide range of those disciplines. And we expect that group's going to do some very good work as we plan for our future. As far as our budget, too, one of the things that we're really excited about, and I want to commend our staff that's in the audience, Sheriff Forrester and Dr. James Sutton in particular. We're introducing the concept that those managers and supervisors actually ought to manage their budget. They ought to know what it is. They ought to be responsible and accountable for it. And so we began a series at their creativity brought this to light of a budget 101 and 201, and in March it'll be 301, where we're actually teaching people how to manage their budget. And that is a concept that I think is going to bode very well for us, and as we drive accountability into the system, I think it's going to be we're going to see some outstanding fiscal results as we move forward. Now, with regards to our budget, we have 5 program areas, and 2 of those are actually passed through. Our poultry diagnostic laboratories and the veterinary diagnostic laboratories are they have their cuts identified, and we just actually they're administratively attached to us, and those are passed through. But the other three, consumer protection, administration, and marketing, let me hit some highlights there. First, with regards to well, let me back up just a second. This is something we started on January 10th. The department, since January 10, we've reduced our number of personnel by 20. This savings will equal to somewhere around $915,000. Now, our additional critical hires on some, like in marketing was an example. Some of you remember former colleague Bobby Harris was there and retired, and we've just had a new person in that position. But these additional critical hires have, even with that, they've still resulted in a net savings of $448,000. Additionally, we're in the process of detailed reviews on our telecommunications and rental spaces expenses, because we're a tenant in a big building and we're consolidating. We're going to recognize some significant savings. We think the discoveries we're making in these two areas will result in fiscal year 12 of savings in excess of $50,000. Now, with regards to consumer protection, the governor's recommendation included a cut of $535,911. We plan on meeting this through retirements, personnel reductions that I've just mentioned, and as mentioned earlier, again, the expected savings as a result of telecom and space reviews. Now, in the area of administration, as you're aware, the governor has recommended a net increase of $17,925 due to statewide rate adjustments in the workers' comp, employee retirement system, and our telecom expenses. We're currently working to allocate the cost of our administration program, because right now it's a matter, if you have someone who's doing payroll, that's an administrative cost, but it needs to be allocated to another program area. And I'm going to get to fiscal affairs in just a moment, but we've done a pretty thorough review that's to get our fiscal house in order, and I'm pleased with the progress there. But this is an area where we have reviewed and are in the process of changing the practice of just where those costs are allocated in administration. A lot of this, again, along with telecom and rental space review findings, you will see these in fiscal affairs as we get to that point. And marketing. Let me give you a quick update. I'm very excited and thrilled with the progress that our team is making. And again, it may be small issues to some, but it is big issues to this department. We discussed the market bulletin not long ago, and we know that we have a business plan engaged now, and I want to give you a very good progress report. I'm pleased to tell you now that we started just about 3.5 weeks ago, with 11,000 paid subscribers. Due to the efforts of our team, we're now over 26,000 subscribers. We're almost halfway home. I suggest to you that we'll make the deadline of the fiscal year. As a matter of fact, I look for this to be hopefully an opportunity for us to enhance our marketing efforts by using this as an enterprise, and I think that there's some opportunities there. But we've collected over $263,000, and that's well on our way to meeting that $580-some-odd-thousand adjustment that was given to us last year. Our teams are working. We have Georgia Farm Bureau competing with county farm bureaus one after another. Georgia Young Farmer chapters, FFA chapters, others are helping compete to sell these subscriptions. Our teams have been out the last 2 weekends, sold almost 500 subscriptions at a flower show this weekend in North Atlanta. So I know it's a lot of time, Mr. Chairman, on that one, but it's important to folks. I just want you to know that even though this weekend we took in about $5,000, we had about 8 employees, the ones out there doing on the road. So we're pounding the pavement. Market bulletins, we're going to get there, and I'm real proud of the progress of our team. The governor's recommendation, Mr. Chairman, in marketing was again a net increase of $31,527, and this is due again to statewide rate adjustments in workers' comp, employee retirement system, and telecom. Mr. Chairman, we were asked to find another 1%, and that results to this department about $300,000. And let me tell you what our suggestions for meeting this requirement. We have some cuts within the market bulletin administration of $147,960 that we would like to ask you to apply to that. This one may be a shock to you because there's not anybody I can. This is one thing I can sure walk and talk on because we've drug cattle all over this state as a family. Nothing much more dear to me than 4-H and FFA programs. But this department's been supporting those programs by just writing checks, and it's not in the budget. And I want to make sure that we can get it in the budget, but as far as going to 2012, we've identified a $42,000 reduction. Just simply, unless we can get it in the budget, we need to absorb that this time and then try to reboot later. And we've informed them this far ahead of time that likely is what we're going to have to do to support the state livestock programs that we just completed in Perry. That leaves us about $100,000, which we have advertising contracts, and we believe those savings can be lifted up and, again, have us an opportunity to reboot in those areas later on. $9,950 is all I have left, and Mr. Chairman, I'm suggesting to you we'll be able to find that through our inspector combination activities that we discussed, combining activities, savings and maintenance at the the State Farmers Market maintenance crew. That's not in the previous personnel issues because when we started on January 10th, we had 8 people. Then up to about 2 weeks ago, we'd gotten down to 2. With some definitely needed changes out there. We're up to 3 now, and I think it's probably going to be somewhere around 5. We'll save that, pay those folks a little better, but also be able to get a better quality and product at the end of the day. Mr. Chairman, I know it's been mentioned several times. Y'all got a tough job, and this is not a new topic to you either, because I think everybody that's sat at this mic today has said it. But we're the stewards of a very important state farmers market system. We bring in about $5 million, and we have expenses of about $3 million, so there's $2 million net. But in the past, members of this committee and others have been very good supporters of bond packages that have helped us, keep our market maintenance where it is. But I suggest to you, while that's important, getting on a cash basis on those market, because none of those, I'm not aware of any of really major expenses or major additions that have come through the bond programs. I may stand corrected, but mainly what we're doing is repairing roofs. We're digging up railroad tracks, and we're putting 25 and 20-year bonds on the table to do that. And I would suggest to you, if there was ever a time, either during this cycle or certainly during 13 as we begin planning during the summer, if y'all could let me have a management control over the P and the L of this operation, we'll manage it for the state of Georgia and get out of bonding maintenance projects. So I think that's just to be a better fiscal policy for the state, or certainly we feel like we've got some talent to bring to that endeavor. But thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, you got several questions here. Representative Black has one for you.
Yes, sir.
First off, you mentioned the Department of been supporting 4-H and FFA. You talk about with personnel costs, not with
yes, sir.
check writing.
Yes, sir.
And
there was a time, Representative, that it was $75,000 a year. 2 years ago, it was cut in half.
Okay. If this be the case, then you no longer continue to support those programs, then that's going to be passing that expense on to those groups, is it not?
Well, yes, sir, to give us a year to plan for it. And I'm hopeful what we might even do with our, again, if we can get our market bulletin revenues where they need to be, and that's certainly some worthy marketing initiatives that we could get an income budgeted to meet that expense. I'm deeply.
Well, you and I both support the program,
yes,
and right, and we're on the same page on this. But this is, this is an accounting situation we're dealing with.
Indeed, it is.
It needs to be addressed. However, how we're going to do it.
Yes, sir.
Chairman Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Commissioner, you mentioned state farmers markets.
Yes, sir.
And the one that's here located close by us. There's been a lot over the last several years of cash receipts out there as far as individuals coming in and out. You're developing a plan for out there. Can you elaborate a little bit on that, about the better record keeping that y'all going to start doing, and this, that, and the other?
Yes, sir. Now, Representative, Mr. Chairman, I have to backtrack a little bit. Our accounting system is a little better than I thought it was after delving into it. I'm pleased. I've had some good discoveries in that area. There's been some other areas where we are putting some rapid improvements. We do have computer terminals. We do have an electronic record of the entrance of trucks, because many of you don't know, if you make a delivery at the farmer's market, there's a $6 and a $10 and maybe even a $15. There's a range of gate fees that if a truck's just making a delivery, they have to pay cash to get in, to make a delivery up on the hill or down at the retail areas. So, what we're busy doing is I have had an excellent meeting with our state auditor early in November. I'm on record asking for the state auditor for a complete audit up and down of our cash balances and a wide range of funds that we have, and one of those is our state farmers markets. So we will have some auditors on site within the month to actually track how our procedures, and I hope I can give you a better report after the end of March.
Thank you.
Chairman, Representative Von Alps.
Mr. Commissioner.
Yes, sir.
I had broached with you a little discussion about Homeland Security positions, and I don't imagine it's reflective in this budget, but probably last year's budget. Can you kind of enlighten me on?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We had 6 officers, and we took a reduction of 3, just simply because of mission and understanding the There's no doubt that Homeland Security is relevant, but whether our exact mission at the time, given the budget circumstances that we're under, is whether that's a relevant expenditure. And so it's caught us with 3 officers now, and I'm hopeful that one thing that we would like to do on into 12 is to our Homeland Security strategy and our law enforcement strategy at our state farmers markets. We have a police force at the state farmers market. We have 16 officers that help protect that place. And quite frankly, that's an expensive proposition too. And in the long run, we're going to have to make sure whether that's I'm not lifting that up to you today, but I'd suggest that we got to look at the cost associated with that and whether we can cooperate with local government to help us in that area.
Is all of that state dollars, or were that federal dollars?
No, so those were federal employment dollars.
Okay.
Yes, or payroll dollars.
And they have been cut, so that's why you've cut these positions.
Yes, sir. Well, we had to find the 800 really where the first part of this comes from is the 4% holdback for 11, because we had a 4% holdback of 824,000 somewhere along, and those numbers change. That's pretty close, and that's what we were directed to do July 1st, but there was nothing done prior to my starting on January 10th, and we had to make it up from somewhere.
Okay. Thank you.
Chairman Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, the 1% additional cut that we're looking at, first of all, we appreciate you working with us, and you've been very willing to go after different things. Now, I'm showing 290,000, 291,000, something like that would be the 1%. Now, are you saying that you're expecting us to include the market bulletin reduction inside the 291?
Well, we were asking you to consider that.
Okay, so not in addition to the 140 something for the market bulletin.
Sherry, help.
Just so I'm clear, so when when we're sitting down and we're actually looking down at the bottom dollar, I want to make sure we're talking about the same amount.
Yes, sir.
Sherry, why don't you come up here? We need
Would you please, because now we're going to have to ask Ms. Forrester.
I don't mean to get all technical on you. I just want to make sure that we're talking about the same money here.
We currently have budgeted state funds in Market Bulletin. A little bit was left over, I think, to give us a little cushion when House Bill 1055 was initiated. of $147,960, I believe. So our proposal is, as part of the 1% cut the $147,960. In addition to that, the other 2 or 3 areas that Commissioner Black mentioned.
Mr. Chairman, just make a note of that. Some of our discussion was that those were 2 separate numbers. So I believe from the other day.
You get that, Tracy?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Representative Black, you have another question?
Yes, sir. Over half of your cut that's in this governor's recommendation here is in the consumer protection.
Yes, sir.
You comfortable that you can be able to cover the ground that's necessary here and not leave us facing something like a peanut butter
yes, sir.
disaster we had here a few years ago?
Yes, sir. And Representative, that's the other thing when we get to fiscal affairs. Quite frankly, I'm going to ask you to hit a reset button, because the cuts that have been taken at this department have been all that's ever been followed in recent years is trying to match the bottom line number. There's been really no acknowledgement of programmary budgeting, and so all have been cut out of administration so that you would think that we're never cutting consumer protection. And so the only way I'm ever going to be able to get hands around this, well, there's 2 things. I guess there's 3 things. First of all, we could flat out gut several of these programs and make the numbers balance, by the program areas. The second way is that we could allocate, which we've done from internally to see what our costs are, to allocate the administration costs to our other program areas. And when you do that, we start getting close. The third option is to ask y'all's help and hit the reset button on the overall program areas so that I can manage it from years going forward, and I can promise you it won't ever happen again.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that's all the questions. Thank you,
Mr.
Commissioner.
Thank you.
Let me let everybody know we're not going to meet tomorrow. I had scheduled a meeting at 2 o'clock tomorrow. We're going to cancel it and reschedule. So, okay, next, why don't we have the World Congress Center folks come up? Frank Poe, Kevin Duvall, and Bill Miller. Bill, you're not going to come up? Okay. All they have is something in the bond package, so.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kevin's passing out a listing of our capital project needs that we've identified for the Georgia World Congress Center. And if I could just give a real brief preamble. The Congress Center represents a $800 million capital asset to the state of Georgia. Within that facility, we support over 330 events annually with an economic impact of roughly $2 billion, of which $157 million comes back to state and local governments in the form of tax revenues. Through the events and activities at the Congress Center, we also support 21,000 jobs for the state of Georgia. The capital bond program list that you see, what's contained in fiscal year 2012 budget is a request for slightly over $1.2 million that would be targeted towards the oldest part of the complex, that would be our Hall A, which is over 30 years of age. We certainly are cognizant of the state's budgetary challenges, and within that context, we're most appreciative of the governor's recommendation of this amount of funds to go into the fiscal 2012 capital budget program. We're here to answer any questions you may have, Mr. Chair.
Any questions? I do not see any.
All right.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, sir.
Why don't we go ahead and go with the Ports Authority? It's all right. Thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate your time and and the opportunity to speak to this committee. Our project is in the bond package this year. We're asking for $32 million for our harbor deepening to continue the state's portion of this important project. Fiscal year 2010 was a impressive year. The sheet you have in front of you should have all of our numbers. You'll see our economic impact numbers as well as our growth numbers. Calendar year 2010 was even more impressive. We saw about a 20% growth, especially in Savannah, and overall tonnage growth was fairly impressive as well. I just got some new numbers today that showed that the Port of Savannah actually moved about 8.6% of total U.S. containerized trade and 12.4% of total U.S. exports. So it's an important facility, and I'd like to see it continue to grow.
Okay, we got a question for you from Chairman right here.
Yes, sir.
In the President's federal budget, there's $600,000, correct?
Yes, sir.
For the deepening. Explain to me, where do we go from here?
Well, we will work with the Congress to plus that money up. The fact that the President put it in the budget means that he supports the project. There are other projects in the Southeast and on the East Coast that were not funded, which may not indicate his lack of support, but having money in the budget means that he does support the project. Because it's in the budget as well, should not be considered an earmark, so we're hoping that some of our congressional delegation will see fit to increase the amount of funding. I don't think we'll get the $105 million that we had hoped to see, but we'll plus it up as much as we can.
Another question, Mr. The $600,000. What is that more for the planning, or
Yes, sir. That's the pre-construction and engineering and design. It's the final approval stage. We should get our final federal approval end of this year, early next year.
One more quick question, Mr. Chairman. The inland port in Crisp County.
Yes, sir.
Explain the impact that's going to have for y'all.
Well, you may not see a massive impact immediately, but as we continue to grow, as the number of trucks and trains come into and out of our facility continues to grow, we may need or we should see some needs for reducing the congestion along the roads. That project is outside of our scope, but we support it because they're going to be bringing some additional cargoes through us. They will be taking cargo from Middle Georgia and Southwest Georgia and moving them via rail, which has no weight restrictions, into our facility over CSX lines. And they'll be able to do so and find some cost savings, we hope, for specific cargoes. One of the things I know that they're looking at some ag cargo out of there, from kale and clay to cotton to I don't know how many watermelons we're exporting out of Crisp County, but we'd be happy to move them through our docks if they'll ship them to us.
And one last question, Mr. Chairman. I promise it's the last. The last mile of Jimmy DeLoach Parkway over there.
Yes, sir.
That in and of itself is going to help, I think, solve a lot of the congestion issues, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's a very important project. It's about 2.9 miles long. Y'all funded it in the FY11 budget through that the Governor Purdue's $200 million transportation package. Thank y'all for that. That project, if you'll think of the state as a funnel, all of the cargoes going out of the state funnel into the ports, whether they're poultry out of Gainesville or pine trees out of South Georgia, they're all going over those roads. And when they're coming in to move to the state's retail centers, they're coming in through the ports over those roads as well. So improving those roads improve the supply chain for the entire state.
Thank you.
Chairman Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you tell me where we're at with some of the rail projects? I know about 5 years ago we put some money in for a new rail yard down there. And also we've had some discussion over the last couple of years about the why, if we've corrected that so we can increase the percentage going out on rail rather than road.
Yes, sir. There are several projects that we're looking at to improve rail. They'd be outside of our gates, so we're working with the CSXs and the Norfolk Southerns to see what they can do. I believe there are some state funds that they can access. I'm not sure through which programs, but I can find those out for you. The one project that's immediately next to the port is an overpass, actually, that will allow rail to go underneath the road so that it's not impeding truck traffic coming into and out of the facility. We've also built a new rail yard on terminal for CSX, which has helped us to decrease our impacts on trucks on terminal and increase our track for CSX as well. Norfolk Southern's seen a lot of growth also on our terminal, and we have plans for expanding both of those rail yards at our facility. It's important to note that the Port of Savannah's Garden City Terminal is the only single terminal on the East Coast that has both Class 1 railroads, CSX and Norfolk Southern, on terminal. And because they have no weight restrictions, that actually allows us to be more efficient and move cargo more efficiently than many of our competitors. If we had to leave the facility to access a rail yard, we'd have to worry about the weight restrictions between the rail yard and the terminal, and then you wouldn't be able to maximize the effects of rail.
And what right now is our percentage road versus rail capacities?
Right now it's about 80-20, 80% truck, 20% rail. But as the price of diesel goes up, you may see that increase.
Increase which way?
Rail increasing over, going higher, maybe up to 25% the next 10 to 15 years. But we're working real hard on that, and external factors may affect that number to jump even more.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see any other questions. Thank you.
Oh.
Well, it's not flashing. What number are you, Ellis?
23. Okay. Would you comment on the import-export ratio? Sir. And I'm going to ask a complex question in the same subject. And also, not just the ratio, but the do you have data on the year-to-year fluctuations, and how consistent are these different commodities that are moved in and out?
Yes, sir. Over the past really 10 to 15 years, I have the numbers. I can provide them to you. I'm actually on a PowerPoint slide. I may have it with me up here today. But it's been fairly balanced. We have a 50-50 import-export ratio. In the past year, we've seen about 52% of our cargo was export. So we're actually exporting more than we're importing. We hope that President Obama takes notice, because he has this national export initiative, and he should see Savannah as a shining example for the nation on how to move cargo efficiently, both in and out of the facilities. Our shipping lines like to see that balance. It means that they're gaining efficiencies on when they're coming to our terminal. At other ports, when they're import heavy, they're coming in full and leaving empty. At the Port of Savannah and the Port of Brunswick, they're coming in full and they're leaving full. And that means that they can make money on their return trip to Europe or Asia or whatever trade lane they're returning to. Our top exports, top 5, you're looking at pine and pine products would be the top 2 commodities. Number 3, I believe, is kale and clay. Number 4 is food, which is largely poultry products. And number 5 are actually chemicals exported out of the state. So when you look at those commodities, you see a lot of pine trees out of South Georgia, kale and clay out of Middle Georgia, and poultry out of North Georgia. It shows the regional economies of the state and how they're affected by the ports. Did I get everything? Oh, okay. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Okay, Lee, I think that's it. Thank you for being here. And we will not meet tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Okay. I think the next is Georgia Football Hall of Fame, College Football Hall of Fame. Gary Stoken, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, Gary. And you're asking for some bonds, I think, if I remember right.
Yes, GO bonds.
Okay.
Now that we are on the state property over at the Georgia World Congress Center, we are endeavoring to build a parking deck on the north end by Stats of the green lot, which will provide the state revenue back on the missed revenue that they will get from giving up the parking lot. So we'll monetize that. We will also close Foundry Street and in the middle of the 2 sites there, the 2 parking lots. Therefore, we will have to extend Baker Street on the backside. We will connect, to the point that Frank Poe brought up earlier, we will connect the College Football Hall of Fame to Hall A, the Georgia World Congress Center, which will lend itself to assist Hall A to come back for convention traffic. So with all those in, we got a $10 million allotment in the last GEO bond package. We were looking for $10 million this year, but we have crunched the budget, raised some additional dollars, and all of these improvements will be state improvements on state property. So we're down to $5 million ask for the GEO bonds for the College Football Hall of Fame.
Got several questions here. Representative Hunter.
Last year, if I remember correctly, we were told that Georgia's part was $10 million. That was Georgia's investment. Is that right?
The governor did put in $10 million.
And we were told that was our investment, our part. And I didn't think we were going to have be asked to put any more in.
We had I guess, an agreement, for lack of a better term, with the Georgia Department of Economic Development that there'd be $10 million in last year's budget and $10 million in this year's budget.
Why didn't the economic development folks let us in on that agreement? They told us last year it was $10 million, period. And now they're coming back and ask for 10 more, and the next year they may come back and ask for 10 more. Excuse me, that frustrated me. You understand what I mean, Mr. Chairman?
I do. Do you have any other comments?
No, sir.
Okay. Chairman Roberts?
And Representative Hanner, I was in those meetings as well, and we were told that. I guess my question, though, is how much of the private funds that y'all were at that point saying you were going to raise, how much have you raised to date of those private match funds?
Yeah, we have raised through the private sector $14 million to this point. We've had numerous meetings, positive meetings with other corporate partners that we are, now that we have a site on the Georgia World Congress Center site, able to go and get funding from the corporations. We also have funding from the city of $25 million in new market tax credits, and $1 million from their economic development fund from the city side as well. The project is probably in total, it's 80 to $85 million. $15 million of that will be state upgrades on the state property, and we're endeavoring to raise the other $70 million.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Chairman Davis.
Is the parking deck? It's not going to be exclusive to the College
No.
Football Hall of Fame, so we'll be able to cross-utilize this with the Centennial Park as well as the World Congress Center.
You're
correct?
exactly right. We had a traffic study done, as well as a demand and throughput analysis study done by two different consultants, and they suggested with the parking needs of that area that we would need to build approximately 415 space parking deck, which is the ask that we're making in this $5 million. That helps build that 415 space parking deck.
And that could be used. It's going to be public parking.
Public parking for aquarium, Centennial Olympic Park, Falcon Games, etc.
Thank you.
I think that's all the questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Why don't we go with economic development, since their name was brought up, and
I got a question.
Elmer, you can come up here. We got chairs.
I got a question. Wait till you get through.
What page
Good
is
afternoon,
that?
Mr. Chairman.
Let me get to the tracking sheet here a minute.
Okay.
So. Representative Hanner threw me off a little bit. 8, okay. 8 of 18, okay. Go right ahead.
Okay. Some of the changes that we're going to see in the proposed
2012 budget. Again, it's a 4% ask that was also carried over from FY11, and where we're getting that is out of marketing cuts to the business recruitment program and the tourism program, about $547,000. Remember, previously when we spoke, we talked about our budget over the last 3.5 years. With this 4% cut, our budget has been cut 31% now over the last 3.5 years since FY8. And that includes this about $1,095,000, which would be the extra 4% in 2012. Like I said, that's in business recruitment and tourism. Some of the other the GATE initiative for telecommunications expenses and some other bookkeeping things for employee retirement. Some of the additional changes in the 2012 are, as some people mentioned, Mr. Cassidy talked about the Georgia Research Alliance. Their funding will now be moved over into our budget in the innovation and technology area, as well as the Georgia Cancer Coalition. We've been instructed that these funds will come over as contract funds, so we will be bringing these money in, passing them out through those respective agencies. The other piece of legislation I think that still has to go through is the change with the Council for the Arts. That's coming into our program as well, and that'll be housed in our tourism program. Some of the other changes that the attached agencies, Civil War Commission funding will be eliminated on that, Aviation Hall of Fame, Music Hall of Fame, and a Sports Hall of Fame. All of those will be zeroed out come 2012.
Chairman Roberts.
I'm not trying to steal Representative Hanner's thunder, but following up on his question, last year we were told that was a one-time ask for the state, and I'm kind of like him to a point. I believe it is a great opportunity for this state, but my question is, are we going to be asked again next year and the year after that? I mean, that was the one thing in a tough budget time last year that we went ahead and put that in and supported it, but the reasoning behind it was we knew it was a one-time ask, and that's all the state would ever have to put in.
Unfortunately, I wasn't part of any of those asks with, the Atlanta Hall management. I met with Mr. Stoken at a meeting earlier in the year, I guess last year, and Commissioner at the time, I really don't know what, transpired during those meetings.
Okay.
Representative Hanner?
I'll make one more statement. You were not a part of that, and I understand that, but I feel like we were misled.
Okay, I don't see any questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see here. Brent, why don't we go ahead and get you, I know you need to get back to Athens probably. Almost 5 o'clock. Soil water conservation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, member of the committee. We're section 43. It's page 85 of my document. Yours may be different.
Page 14.
14, okay. Soil and Water Commission in FY12, Governor's recommendation will sustain an 8% reduction, which will total a 28% reduction beginning in fiscal year 09. Three main areas that are affected by the reductions that are on the pages in front of you. It's about an $83,000 reduction in regular operating cuts, a $90,000 reduction in personal services, and a $55,000 reduction in contract funds. And those are just general categories. I'll go program by program. Under Commission Administration, the last item, 43.1.4, is about a $9,000 reduction. That'll be through purchasing reductions and travel. In our Conservation of Ag Water Supplies, the next program, the last two items in that program, reduction in personal services of $28,000. That'll be leaving a existing vacant position vacant again for next fiscal year. And then the reduction in operating expenses of near $500 will account for travel reductions. Conservation of Soil and Water Resources is the program that will take the bulk of the reductions when it comes to the 8% cuts. The last two items in that category, reduction in funds for operating of almost $74,000. That'll be through a reduction in travel, purchasing, and also office lease renegotiations. We only have 6 offices across the state, but we're in the process of renegotiating those leases in hopes to gain savings there. The last item under that category, reduction in funds for personal services, a reduction of almost $57,000. That'll be through either a reduction in hours of existing full-time budgeted staff down to around 69 hours per 2-week pay period, or through attrition or keeping current vacancies, depending on what our vacancies look like come the new fiscal year on July the 1st. Under our watershed flood control program, you'll see 2 reductions. One, item 3 there, is a reduction of a little over $2 million, almost $2.1 million. That'll be stimulus funds that were brought into the budget through our watershed program to do upgrades to match existing state bonds that we had. So we'll lose that $2 million in federal funds. And then the item 4 is a reduction of $30,000, and that is actual reductions for maintenance dollars where we go in and maintain existing dams through the removal of trees, updating the spillways, and things of that nature. Yes, sir.
Brad, stop right there. We've got a question here from Chairman Roberts.
Explain a little bit more about that program, because I remember when we put the money in there originally. Explain a little bit more where we're at.
About the watersheds, right?
Yeah.
Okay. In the state of Georgia, there's 357 flood control reservoirs that were built early 50s, mainly in the 60s and 70s, for flood control protection. Majority of them are, 90% of them are north of Macon, northwest, northeast Georgia. They were built to control flood events. Now they fall under the Safe Dams category through the Safe Dams Act that was passed. It's our responsibility as a state agency and local soil and water districts to maintain those dams, remove trees and brush and things of that nature. That was in exchange for the federal funds that were used in the 50s, 60s, and 70s to build them. We as a state have done a poor job in maintaining that infrastructure. We're in the process now of working on between 3 and 5 dams a year. It'll take us many years, Mr. Representative, at 350 to go. But that's a small amount. We actually, with the $30,000 reduction, we'll have about $95,000 left. That'll allow us to do 3 to 4 dams a year at that level.
So y'all are basically going in there and removing the debris off the dam?
Right. Trees, some, several inches in diameter, some multiple inches in diameter, that have been allowed to grow in the last 40 to 50 years.
I'm trying to understand a little bit, because Representative Black and we always try to keep something on the dams to keep them from eroding away. And
right, and we go in and vegetate. There's natural there's grass and other types of vegetation. The concern we have with trees growing on the dam, especially on the back side of the dam, is, of course, the tree roots are going to grow towards the water on the front side of the dam. If that water finds the root, it will breach the dam. We haven't had that happen yet, but some of the standing timber we have on some of these dams would be quite frightening if you saw it.
Yeah,
We've never had a failure, though.
Thank you.
Hope we don't.
That'd be it.
Okay.
The last program, Mr. Chairman and Committee, Water Resources and Land Use Planning, you'll see item 4 is about a little over $4,000 reduction, and we'll do that through reducing personal services administrative time, and then a reduction of operating expenses of right about $100. And then the last item, item 6, is a reduction of $25,000. That will eliminate all water supply planning funding that we have within our state budget to work with communities on water supply planning, specifically related to reservoirs. I've also provided Tracy with a one-page handout, Mr. Chairman, related to the bond request that was in the governor's recommendation. It's a $6 million request to work on 3 dams that need to be more than just the trees removed, Mr. Roberts. What needs to be done there is actually a new spillway put in, because houses have been allowed to develop down below the dam. If the dam breaches, we have a loss of life. So with this request of $6 million, we'll be able to work on 3 dams. One of those dams is in Fulton County. The other 2 are in Habersham County. They were selected based on the risk index and the amount of engineering that had already been done, and we're able to do that with $6 million. Should federal dollars be made available, Mr. Chairman, we'll be able to do possibly double that, 6 dams. But with just $6 million in state funds, we'll only be able to work on 3. As other agency heads have discussed, we've been asked to bring forth to you an additional 1% cut, and we've communicated with Tracy that should a 1% cut be taken, we'd ask it to be taken in the Conservation of Soil and Water Resources program. It'd be about a $28,000 cut in operating expenses, and it'll probably will cause a reduction in staffing, again, as we've mentioned earlier. The last thing I'll mention, Mr. Chairman, is we're still in the process of looking for funding for our agricultural water metering program. We've talked about this in past. I know Representative Hanner's had an interest in that and a lot of others. That's been funded through the One Georgia Authority since 2004. And, of course, we know they're going through the funding mechanism, as we all are at agency heads and other agencies. So we're looking for funding for that in fiscal year 12, and as of now don't have a funding source. So that's about a $500,000 need, and that's to read and maintain existing meters, about 10,000 meters.
Okay, Representative Ellis Black has a question for you.
On these dams that you were talking about.
Yes, sir.
When you have a series of dams in the same watershed.
Yes, sir.
One of them on the top end of the watershed gives way for some reason.
Yes, sir.
Who holds liability?
The person upstream has a certain liability, depending on where it falls under the safe dams category. Safe dams law says if it's of a certain height, and I can't quote it because I'm not the person that runs that program, but if it's over, I think, 20 feet in height or stores X number of acre feet of water, then the local, the owner of the property is liable for that. If a new dam was going to be built, like some of the new dams that we're building with federal funds, we have to take into account those breaches having occurred upstream and take that into account to what we construct. But if something existing, it's the existing landowner that would be at fault. It's my understanding.
Is there any cases where there's been any action taken on? I know of some situations where we've had the chain reaction, because if one upstream blows.
Yes, sir. I'm not privy to much information about actual fines or anything that's been issued or orders that have been issued related to that. I do know, though, in new construction, that it prevents us from building a lot of reservoirs, as Representative Roberts knows, because of things that have or have not been done upstream properly, and the sizing of the things, the new dams that need to be built below those sites. It's very complicated and makes a lot of private individuals that own property very upset when they're not able to build what they want to build due to improper engineering upstream.
Does a person that is upstream, of course, you said that now to put in another dam further down that watershed, you've got to go through some engineering hoops that you got to jump through.
Yes, sir.
But now, is that person upstream, does he have any way of being aware that there is something down there that he could be held liable for?
Other than looking at their own maps and going to the tax assessor's office and looking at maps, I don't know of any legal obligation, no, sir. And once again, I'm not an expert on that. If you have a specific situation, I'd be glad to talk with you in detail. Usually these things get very specific, and it's not a very generic answer that I could give.
I just know one, this is down home, there's one place down home where there's 4 sites that have had ponds. And they have blown out in a chain reaction.
Yes, sir.
The first one goes, just boom, boom, boom.
Yes, sir. The fortunate thing about the structures I'm talking about, the 357 flood control structures, is they were built with federal funds. They were, just to say it modestly, over-engineered. Had they not been over-engineered, they would not have lasted the 50 years that we have now, nor would they be able to sustain the tree growth that's on the backside of these dams. So we're very fortunate to have benefited from some of our forefathers in the construction of that. And that continues on today. If you're using federal funds and even state funds, you're going to have an over-engineering of that to prevent that from occurring.
Okay, that's all the questions I see, Brent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We'll let you know when we meet again.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is the Georgia Cancer Coalition here? Anybody here? Okay. Why don't we, Kevin Clark, why don't you come up? I'm sure yours is brief. Georgia Environmental Finance Authority, Kevin Clark. We're going to try to change your name again this year?
I hope not.
Okay, me too.
We have one item in the, it's in 16.12, I believe, Mr. Chairman. I don't have the exact page.
It's in the Department of Community Affairs for the members.
Under the Department of Community Affairs, yes, sir. We have $286,000 for the Georgia Rural Water Association, same amount that we had for amended FY11 and for the same purposes. So we would ask that stay in, and we'd be able to pass that through to for the good works that those folks do.
Any questions? I don't see any questions. Thank you, Gov.
Thank you, sir.
Thought Representative Hanner would have a question. Georgia Forestry Commission. I think you have a list too. Do we have a list? Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and committee. The Governor's FY12 budget recommendations for the Georgia Forestry Commission are very similar to our FY11 amended recommendations, and if it's acceptable to the Chairman, what I'd like to do is just provide a high-level overview of the highlights of the Governor's proposal. We've provided you a copy of the detailed figures and supporting documentation for our proposals, and if you would look at the single page, it says GFC FY12 budget overview, and I'll hit the major points. First, with GFC budget history, Forestry Commission has implemented a 31% overall budget reduction since FY9. If you look at the Consumer Price Index going back to a decade ago, our current purchasing power is 43% less than we had a decade ago. On regular operations projections, based on the FY7 through FY10 fire expenditures and the projected FY11 fire season, Forestry Commission is projecting a $1 million shortfall in regular operating funds. That is, funds to put fuel in our equipment and repair firefighting equipment, etc. GFC was recently advised that all of our radios must be relicensed to meet FCC narrow banding requirements. The estimated cost for that is $218,000, and we really appreciate this committee putting $72,000 in to get us started in the FY11 fund. That does leave $146,000 remaining to initiate that narrow band licensing. Workers' compensation adjustments, GFC's been advised that those premiums should be adjusted down. There is information on that in your thick package. We've not received a reduced invoice to date. We've been promised we will receive one, but if we don't see that, that'll amount to a $150,000 budget reduction that we'll have to take out of regular operations. Currently, the reduction in federal funds based on current congressional and presidential recommendations or budget proposals, we're estimating a reduction of $650,000 in federal funds. 89% of those funds are fire control funds. SFA funds is what we call those. So we're looking for those reductions in FY11 and FY12. Forestry Commission's been restructuring to meet the economic crisis. Since the 1st of 2009, we've eliminated state funding for 94 positions. 49 of those have been fire control positions. We've closed 16 fire control offices statewide. We've expanded supervisor span of control, going from 12 districts down to 6 districts. We've also closed 16 fire control offices, and we've expanded span of control for 10 of our chief rangers. That's local supervisors. In other words, going from supervising 2 county unit fire control offices to three fire control offices. We're reducing fire suppression vehicles and fire suppression equipment by 50. 21 bulldozers, 29 fire control vehicles. We've restructured, reorganized our resources, restructured our service delivery to supply only those critical services that are critical to GFC's mission. From a bonding standpoint, we've submitted a request for $20 million in bonds. $13 million of those $20 are for equipment needs for FY12, and that is after we've eliminated 50 pieces of fire control equipment. Capital improvement needs, again, as mentioned earlier by another commissioner, of $6 million in needs, again, roofing, asphalt, equipment, or building repairs. FCC is requiring that we meet narrowband requirements for our radio equipment by January 1st, 2013. This is a got-to-do thing. We need over $1 million in bonds request to implement that. And the governor's proposal is $5.7 million in bonds. And we do ask that this committee consider that critical and maintain that level of funding within the Forestry Commission budget. Additionally, the committee has asked that we identify a 1% cut above and beyond the governor's recommendation. Over the past several months, we've been working closely with the governor's office to evaluate and determine and develop a plan that we can execute our core critical missions at a 6% level, 6% reduction level. I'd like to ask that you turn to this single page again, firefighter loss implications. And we have to start with the 2007 wildfires. If many of y'all remember that season, the worst in our history, we spent $62 million putting out forest fires. Since that time, actually since 2009, Forestry Commission has lost 94 positions. Our capacity to meet the demands for an above normal fire season haven't been tested since 2007 due to the mild nature of our fire seasons from 2008 through 2010. Forestry Commission and the National Interagency Coordinator Center is projecting an above normal fire season for 2011. And even though we are just now entering into the jaws of the fire season, these numbers are showing to be true. Fire numbers for FY11 have increased by 54%. We've lost 82% more acres than our normal 5-year average. Georgia's had over 5,000 fires that have burned 23,000 acres plus already in FY11. As of last week, in a 7-day period, our GFC Rangers suppressed 673 wildfires in a 7-day period. Those fires burned nearly 6,000 acres. We've experienced 8 citizen-related fatalities in FY11, 2 fatalities in the past 2 weeks, and actually a little over a week ago, our Walker County Ranger saved a citizen that was engulfed in a wildfire, passed out, and was burning, and he pulled that citizen out of the fire. We've lost 89 homes, lost or damaged so far this fiscal year. 263 outbuildings lost or damaged this fiscal year. 225 motorized vehicle and equipment. That's trucks, tractors, hay balers, combines, various farm equipment. 225 lost so far this year. And again, we are just now entering the real fire season. Here in the past 2 weeks, we've called on the National Guard to assist, bring in the CH-47 with the Bambi bucket. We've called on Fish and Wildlife Service to help with their helicopters. We're pulling inmates out of prisons to help us put out fires, working on hand crews. We've mobilized our GFC firefighters from across the state, move them up to North Georgia to attack a rash of fires. We're cross-training all of our professionals to play an active role in fire control. We're hiring structural firefighters that we've put through the Georgia Basic Wildland Firefighter course to assist us with wildfires. We're contacting all of our retirees, begging them to come in and help us and work as temporary day labor firefighters, asking those folks, retirees, to go on call and assist us. To give you some indication how tight we are and how stretched we are for resources, a little over a week ago, I was on a bulldozer fighting a fire, putting out wildfires. We're having extreme fire activity all across the South. This weekend, Texas Forest Service had forced evacuations in 7 cities and communities, 5 counties. Texas and North Carolina are asking for our help through the Southern Forest Fire Compact. I don't have the resources to send to help them. The real downside of that is when we start asking for help, they're not going to have the resources to send to Georgia either. We're all stretched with budget cuts across the South. Again, we've lost 94 positions since 2009. We've closed 16 fire control offices. We're eliminating 50 fire control pieces of equipment. We've not been tested with this level of reductions with anything beyond a normal fire season. We're having a fire season well beyond normal this year. As we speak right now in South Georgia, we've got several fires burning hundreds of acres. Brantley County, we've got a 200-acre wildfire that's spotting a quarter of a mile to a half mile out in front of the main flame front. We're doing forced evacuations in Brantley County right now. In Charlton County, right now as we speak, we've got a neighborhood burning. We've lost 3 structures. We've always shot straight with you on our budget request. We've never asked for more than we absolutely need. We've worked hand in hand with you to meet the budget requirements during these economic crises, not only this year but years past. Our GFC professionals have always rose to the occasion to do more with less. But I have to advise you today that these additional cuts will endanger our forest, our property, and our lives across the state. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, got a question here from Chairman Roberts.
First, I'd like to say it's probably the best budget presentation you've ever given. And I mean that out of sincerity by saying everybody don't understand the importance of the forestry department. And I think you need to educate other members as to what's going on right now in this state and what it could cause you and could cause us as citizens as we move forward. So I want to commend you on that.
Thank you.
And you ain't got to go over it now, but if you would, I'd like to see what you're planning on buying. I mean, the equipment that you're going to buy with that $13 million. I mean, okay, never mind. I got it. Thank you very much. I mean, we've talked. I mean, are we talking about the Enviro cabs and all in here?
Yes, sir. All of our crawler equipment now, suppression units, we're purchasing environmental cabs with those, primarily as a safety feature.
Good. Thank you.
Robert, how many people do y'all have working there now, total?
As of right now, our budgeted allocated positions are 667. Due to the budget reductions, I think the actual warm noses we've got is 538.
538, okay.
And that's our goal with this budget reduction plan is to fill back to 567. And what we're doing right now, as I mentioned, is trying to contract with temporary day laborers to come in and assist through all aspects. Fire departments, industry folks that have experience, people with CDL licenses, folks we've put through the certification training in the years past, and again, retirees.
Okay. So you're at wit's end now, right?
Yes, sir. I really need to be down in South Georgia on a crawler tractor right now.
Okay. Why don't you go ahead and leave? We'll get with you later on when we meet again.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Good job. Department of Community Affairs is our last one, I hope. Sorry, Phil, you had to be last.
That's all right, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to be with you all today. I think we're on page 6. Is that right?
Let's see.
Is that right? Okay. Looking at the coordinated planning program, 16.2.2. We've already got in there in the governor's budget that's a 10% cut to the regional commissions of $286,000. Down in the departmental administration program, unlike other agencies, for some reason our telecom adjustment got set in just one of our programs, the administration, and I think y'all worked with us or going to be working with us in 07 amended process, and hopefully so we can get that spread across all of our programs like we're doing for the other agencies. We'd appreciate y'all working with us on that. And then in the federal community economic development programs, 16.4.2, there is another reduction of operating expenses of $38,000. Skipping down to the 16.7 rental housing programs, this is funds that are have been used in the past to make a federal match for federal dollars. We've got another resource that we can use to do that. So like in 07, we're recommending that be cut. That's a elimination of state funds in that program of $2.6 million. In 16.8 research and surveys, we've got another operating expense cut there of 16.6. And then on the next page, we've got 16.9. There was a reduction of a one-time ad that had been in there in the years past of $75,000. State community development programs. We had this was another issue that came up in 07 where we had I said, what did I say, 07? An 11. Was I doing that earlier? Uh-oh. What year is this? In the 11 budget of $91,000. This was a mistake, and OPB has worked, I think, with both Senate and House budget offices to actually spread that across, I think, 3 other programs. There was just an error made on some calculations, I think, when the budget was put together, and appreciate y'all working with us on that in 11 and also in the current year. And we have those numbers that we can provide. And Tracy, you already have those. But then in 16.11 there, state economic programs, we have an ad there for REBA. This is basically deal closing money that the Department of Economic Development uses to attract companies and jobs to the state. And we work with them on that, and that's the $5 million that you see there.
Okay, any questions? Phil, what is 16.61 again? What is that for? Regional services?
The Regional Services Program?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. That's where we work with local governments and housing agencies around the state, basically providing them with technical assistance to help them do what they need to get their jobs done and access the department's funds.
So that has nothing to do with RDCs then, right?
No, sir. That's
okay.
not.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? Okay. Don't see any. Terry, do you want to say anything? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll let you know when the next meeting will be.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, that concludes, unless somebody else needs to say something. Matt, do you want to say anything? Okay. All right. Thank y'all for being here.